All right, so we are going to now talk about the four subfields of anthropology. So like we said, anthropology is a broad umbrella of a discipline, and it involves this way of thinking, which we're going to learn throughout the semester. But within that broad umbrella, you've got four subfields. So cultural anthropology, which is what this class focuses on, obviously, archaeology, biological anthropology, sometimes you'll hear this called physical anthropology, and then linguistic anthropology. So let's go through each one individually, then we'll talk about what each of the subfields has in common. All right, cultural anthropology, this is what this class is focused on. So this is talking about the social lives of people, of living communities. So we're not studying ancient cultures here with cultural anthropology. We're studying cultures and people that are alive now. We might study the history of that culture, but it's a culture that's currently existing. So we have to go there. We have to see that culture. We have to learn about it. Before the 1970s, it was mostly non-Western cultures. So traditionally, a cultural anthropologist would leave the comfort of their own culture, their own home, and fly or boat somewhere, depending on the century you're in. They go somewhere very, very far off, very remote, somewhere very different. And so they live there for a year or more and study that culture, really get to know that culture. Today, we're studying more localized culture. We're studying less, there's less focus on traveling to a far remote place. Anthropology's kind of broadened its horizons a little bit, which involved bringing it closer to home. So now as anthropologists, we still continue to study, obviously, these remote or far off or very new different cultures, but we're also studying things very close to home. So we'll probably read through the semester a lot of different ways of doing anthropology. We'll learn a lot about different places people have done anthropology, and sometimes that can be within your own, like university, for example. You could do a study on how your university functions. So it doesn't have to be something very different or remote or far off. Now we're studying cultures that are a lot closer to home, and sometimes even your own culture, which can be very difficult. But anthropologists are seeing this shift now, and we're not just studying very distant cultures. And this comes with a shift in methodology and shift in theory, both of which we'll talk about as we move through the semester. Archaeology, like I said, is probably one of the most well-known fields. So when you talk to people about being an anthropologist, a lot of times they think you're doing archaeology. So archaeology is in the public eye a lot more than cultural anthropology, especially, or especially linguistic anthropology, things like that. Okay, but archaeology is studying past cultures. So if cultural anthropology studies current living cultures, archaeology studies past cultures. And this is through excavation usually. So we're looking for cultural artifacts, things that were left behind that can give us clues as to how the people lived and what they believed, thought, felt, and those sorts of things. So there's two different types of archaeology. We're going to have prehistoric archaeology. This is the time before written records. Okay, so they're looking for big changes in prehistory. So changes in subsistence strategy or political organization, switching from cities to states or to nation states, things like that, that you can see in the archaeological record. Historic archaeologists are looking at sites that do have written records, so sites that were occupied during historical times. Okay. Excavations are then going to be looking for perspectives, ideas, behaviors, things like that that aren't recorded in historical documents. Okay. So there's two separate types of archaeology there. The next one to talk about is biological anthropology. This is focusing on physical aspects of the human species. So remember I told you I did that conservation field school in Costa Rica. That's what this is. That's biological anthropology, studying primates to learn about them, to help us learn about ourselves. We're going to be looking at evolution of humans, health and disease, looking at the behavior of non-human primates, human genetics, diet and nutrition, impacts of social stress on the body. So we can use the study of primates to kind of glean some insight into humans, our development, things like that, because we did share a common ancestor. So this is the field that uses evolution most heavily. Okay, so humans and primates share a common ancestor. This is a scientific fact. And so by studying, let's say, chimpanzees and humans, for example, if we share a behavior, it's likely that that behavior originated from our common ancestor. if the behavior isn't shared, if there's a divergence in how that behavior is applied, that probably is likely to have happened after our shared ancestor. So that helps us kind of date the emergence of behaviors and things like that. Okay, so biological anthropology is a field that I'm really interested in outside of cultural anthropology. And I think it's a very interesting field and one that's often overlooked. We don't think about that working within the field of anthropology. We tend to think about those kind of topics on your screen there more as topics that we focus on by a biologist or an animal behaviorist. Lastly, we have linguistic anthropology. So this studies how people communicate through language, okay? And how does language shape group identity and group membership and things like that? And how do we order our world using linguistic categories? We'll do an entire section on linguistic anthropology, so I don't want to dwell on it here. There are a couple different types of linguistic anthropology, so descriptive or sociocultural. I believe your book mentions those in the first chapter, but we'll focus on that once we get to that section of the class. Alright, so there you've got the 4 subfields. Cultural, which obviously is this class, archaeology, biological or physical anthropology, and then linguistic anthropology. So even though this is a cultural class, we do want to talk about all of those, because remember, anthropology is this umbrella, and underneath we have the 4 subdisciplines. And now let's talk about a little bit about how they work together, and the overlapping role of each one, and the shared and common characteristics of each.